8. There are a couple of Board of Land Use Committee members who are on the Zoom pursuant to an exemption afforded them for this meeting. I don't see them yet, but I'm sure they will be here at some point in time. I'm going to change the agenda around a little bit to address a couple of issues as to which we are required to take action first. With respect to the major issue of the evening, it is again the joint committee of the Economic Committee and Land Use on the subject of the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. I have consulted with the chair of the board, and it is my strongly held view that while we can discuss that tonight, a separate vote will be taken on it at the January meeting so that everybody has had a chance to review this stuff. That vote will be taken on it as a whole. The idea of a piecemeal issue by issue one, unless you direct otherwise, makes no damn sense to me unless you think you want to have it issue by issue, do you?
I don't think we need issue by issue. I think that whatever we vote on could potentially have contingencies and reservations in there. And then people could vote up or down on that, as opposed to just taking it without any modifications or making any recommendations. In my view, our job is to make a recommendation, not just yes or no.
I would just make a suggestion. You might want to think about having the vote at a separate meeting of your committee and a separate vote of land use, because they're going to be two separate votes. There's some people on your committee that aren't here. Not that.
Well, at the January meeting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't need an answer now. Just think about it. Do whatever you want. I'm game to follow your lead.
Well, I think that's fine as long as we vote on one document. We want to vote on one resolution, not two separate resolutions.
All right, so, good evening. Should we do the roll call quickly?
Land use first, Charles Merdlow? Yes. Marty Wolfoff, yes. Sylvia Alexander?
Yes.
Bob Bender? Don't see. Carol Blake?
Here.
See? Okay. 2, 3, 4. Nicholas Fazio? Here. 5. Daniel Rowan? Here. 6. Jessica Sosa? Here. Laura Spalta?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a quorum.
And you have,
We also have 3 people who are here by extraordinary circumstances. Lee Chum is here, David Gelbin is
Present.
present, and Omar Murray.
Present.
Okay.
and I would like to ask the 2 people that we're admitting just what their name is, if you don't mind.
Okay.
For a minute. Just give me 1 minute to ask them, and I'll ask them to name themselves. The person who just joined in on their iPhone, can you please name yourself?
Myra Fassner.
Oh, no, you're, okay. And then the owners, someone just joined on their iPad, can you please name yourself? Someone on their iPad? Owner's iPad, also 914-548-9481. Can you please tell us your name?
Patty Lucas.
Patty Lucas? Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is
Okay.
Paul Phillips from Bronx City Planning.
I'm sorry, which one is that?
Sorry, this
The
is,
iPad is Bronx City Planning?
yeah, hold on 1 second.
Wonderful, thank you. Yep.
We have,
To do Economic Development Committee roll call. Here.
Von Watson. Peter Gomez. Sheila Hilliard, Ellery Christmas.
Is that enough? How many members were just on the economic committee? I think all of you were, got land use as well, right? All right, so unless somebody has on the committee, has a strongly held contrary view, I would propose to take the actual applications on which we have to take action first, and then go over to City of Yes, and the quick report on Hebrew Home after that, only because I want to be sure that there's enough time to deal with the matters that we have to vote on within a time frame. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. Item number 1, SNAD application, Riverdale Country School driveway improvements. Mr. Powers. Mr. Powers.
Yes, good evening. I'm Jim Power from Kramer Levin, Naftalis and Frankel on behalf of Riverdale Country School. This application requests approvals under the Special Natural Area District regulations for the construction of an expanded bus drop-off and pickup area to replace the existing area at Riverdale's upper school campus. The project is intended to address issues of student safety and traffic flow on Fieldston Road. We have appeared before Board 8 previously on behalf of Riverdale Country School, most recently in 2015, when the board unanimously supported approvals for a new natatorium on the upper campus, which has since been constructed. And we have also provided an updated master plan for the upper school campus, reflecting the constructed natatorium and this proposed project. Head of school Kari Ostrom was planning on joining. I know she had another event tonight and was hoping for some advance notice. So we're trying to get her to join the call to discuss in a bit more detail the school's programmatic need for the project. Hopefully she'll be able to join. And Johanna Phelps of Matthews Nielsen Landscape Architects will describe the specific alterations, the effects on natural features, and the landscape restoration proposed. Finally, Riverdale has communicated with its immediately surrounding neighbors on Fieldston Road about the project and has sent notice of this meeting to all property owners surrounding the campus. I wonder, was Kari able to join, or Mike Galligan from Riverdale maybe could speak just briefly about the purpose of the project since he's available now.
Is there anybody on the committee who has any questions? One moment before we do that. I think there's a fourth member on the Zoom. Rosemary?
Yes.
Did I see you? Rosemary?
She's
I guess
on.
not. She was before. Okay.
Maybe she just clicked on.
Is there anybody on the committee that has any questions with respect to the application of the Riverdale Country School? Is there anyone on Zoom who has any question or comment concerning the Riverdale Country School application? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve? Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded, abstentions. Unanimous. Second is a report from the Special Committee on the Stag construction and hopefully Waldo Avenue.
Just note that we had been led to believe that it would be completed by the end of the year. That is not the case. They're having problems with a glazier who is making their windows I believe in Kansas City, they haven't had delivery, thus they've had a stall, but they've used that time of the stall to make some renovations to the concept of the building. As a result, it will probably not be till the end of January when the building is completed. They have found the sculpture, they're putting it out in front, will be putting it out in front. It is not a local artist, but nonetheless, it should beautify the area. With respect to everything, no information yet on how the rentals will go, how the lottery will be set up, nothing like that. And we talked about how it will be unfolding on getting the sidewalk back the way it was supposed to be, should be, was discussed over and over again. So that represents movement on their part. The only issue with that is the relationship they have with the building next door, 3751, where some damage was done as a result of insufficient protection between the buildings. They're working on that, and that has been good at it, but has not completed it. As soon as the structure that is used for the elevator, the hoist is used, as that is removed, as soon as the elevator is functional and Con Ed puts in the appropriate power and it's approved, then they'll take that down and they'll lift to fix all the problems with 3751. The opportunity while we were meeting to talk about Waldo Avenue and that plus a little research of my own, and thank you to one of the local residents who's given me information I was able to share. The first thing I did, even though I was never authorized on behalf of the board, was to thank STAG for the contribution of the turkeys that we were able to give out to the community. So, express our appreciation. Building, which I had thought earlier, months ago, when we talked about what was happening on Waldo, I thought that was going to be a major effort. Apparently, it's not as major as anticipated, and pretty much the interior and all the things they needed to do, like removing fake walls and such, and replacing what was damaged as a dormitory, apparently that's all been done. Waldo, Tech owns the building, but the contract to run the building as a shelter, not as a shelter, as a residence of migrant families, with West Hab, and West Hab will operate it completely. Again, the building belongs to STAG, but the operation is part of West Hab. And there is, I don't have it with me, the breakdown of the apartments, the sizes and such. Note that 5 apartments are being set aside for administration, office space, conference room, security headquarters, and a recreational use, tenant recreational use area. And based on what I've heard, it is quite possible the building will begin functioning sometime in January. The information that I have.
Any questions? Any member of the committee? Any member on the Zoom? Going once, going twice. Thank you, Marty. Let me just. Oh, thank you. Before we go on to the next item, I need a motion or to ask you first, are there any comments, corrections, or the like respecting the minutes of the meeting held on November 6th? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve?
Chuck, there was one typo on the guests. It's Jesse Lehrer,
Mm-hmm.
L-E-H-R-E-R.
Okay.
The E-R was left off.
L-E-H,
R-E-R.
got it.
No H.
No H?
Oh, okay.
Yes, just,
Correction on the
Very
correction.
correct.
Lerer.
that's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Assemblyman, we will get to you immediately, but let me just finish this. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded, abstentions unanimous. Mr. Assemblyman. You're on, Jeff.
Oh, it's Jesse, not, it's the representative.
Yes, the Assemblyman is not here.
Oh, who's covering for him?
I am, sir, Jesse Lair, his community liaison.
Do you have any report from him or the like?
No, not at this time.
Is there anybody here representing the city council member? Is there anyone here representing the state senator? Anyone here representing any of the other council members? Anyone here representing the congressman? Okay, so we will now move on. The next item is 5 minutes, Mr. Powers, on the subject of.
Hi, it's me. I don't see you online. I actually had the balls to sign in for this piece of shit. Land juice. I don't see you here. So I hope you're okay. Okay, there you go. Bye.
You are recorded as present.
Insane piece of shit.
Is the recording on?
Yes, it is. See?
Okay? Now, and good evening, Rosemary. 5 minutes on Hebrew Home, which will be the subject of a full discussion at the January meeting. Mr. Powers.
Yes, thank you again. Good evening, Jim Power from Kramer Levin on behalf of Hebrew Home at Riverdale and River Spring Living. I'm joined by my colleague, Gary Tarnoff. We're here to provide a brief update on the status of the new Continuing Care Retirement Community, or CCRC, project and the applications we have pending at City Planning. We will be back with the full project team to make a more complete presentation in early 2024. This is Hebrew Home.
Back at a presentation in January.
We're very happy to come back in January to make a more complete presentation, absolutely. I will just share my screen to show, could I share my screen to show the site plan, or I could go through?
Yeah, let me,
without doing this?
yeah, you can.
Okay. And sorry, let me just find it here.
Where are we?
Trying to share his screen so we can show what he wants to show in 5 minutes.
Let's see.
There we go.
That's working. No, that's not working. Stop share. I'll just proceed since I'm having some technical difficulties. So the Hebrew Homes existing campus is on the west side of Palisade Avenue, between Palisade and the Hudson River, and between 254th Street and 261st Streets. The existing facilities include buildings for skilled nursing, assisted living, and independent living. They are located on the north portion of the campus, which is in an R4 zoning district. In 2011, Hebrew Home acquired the south portion of its campus, which is located in an R1 district, from the Passionist Fathers. The entire campus is in the Special Natural Area District. In 2018, City Planning granted a series of approvals for a new independent living building consisting of 3 separate wings that would become part of the CCRC. The approved site plan showed an 11-story wing on the North Campus and wings of 5 stories and 3 stories on the South Campus. And the approvals at that time were a special permit to allow the long-term care facility in the R1 district. The use is as of right on the north campus which is in an R4 district, and a series of authorizations under the SNAD regulations. While the application was under review in 2018, Hebrew Home agreed to various changes requested by Board 8 and local community groups and incorporated its commitments into a restrictive declaration and a memorandum of understanding. However, while the project was supported by the Land Use Committee at that time, by a split vote, the full board voted against the project. But the project, with the modifications requested by Board 8, was ultimately approved by City Planning and the City Council.
And the
Since-
borough president.
And the borough president, yes. Construction has been delayed as a result of COVID and other issues, but Hebrew Home is now planning on commencing construction of Phase 1, North Campus Wing, sometime next year. In the fall of 2022, we filed an application to renew the term of the special permit and the authorizations for an additional 3-year term. That application is still pending, and we have submitted a draft application to modify the project in certain respects. We believe these modifications are minor and represent improvements to the site plan. They include improvements to the north entryway to facilitate the flow of traffic on and off of Palisade Avenue, internal circulation changes, and changes to the Phase 1 wing, including an 11-foot increase in the height to accommodate both mechanical equipment and a proposed rooftop terrace. There would be no increase in floor area or the total number of units in the project. We have been in discussions with the interested community groups about the modifications and about an update to the memorandum of understanding. I'm happy to answer any questions
Time out.
now.
Time
But-
out. Hold on.
Yes,
You're increasing the height of the building?
by 11 feet to accommodate.
For a terrace, am I correct?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I believe you said you are increasing the height 11 feet for a terrace?
For both some additional mechanical equipment as required by code and to allow rooftop access for a terrace and a club room, both of which were not part of the original approval in 2018.
So that there will be additional height to the building or not?
There will be additional height to a portion of the building, yes. It will be taller.
And have you received yet any plans to show the nature of the proposed terrace, accessibility and the like?
That is reflected on the plans prepared by the architect. I'm not prepared to present those this evening, but we
I'd
will.
like to be sure that you present them at your earliest possible convenience to the signatories of the prior agreement.
Yes,
so
they have been.
that it can be, do they have it?
Yes, we have. They have. We sent along a copy of our complete city planning application to them immediately upon filing. I think Sheridan Paulson can speak to that.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, we have seen the design presentation that includes the additional height. And we waited for the application materials from city planning. As I said, we will make a formal statement once we've had time to digest.
Be sure you have it, that's all. Right. When you have it, will you please send a copy to the board? Mr. Powers,
I will do so, yes.
let's move on.
David has his hand raised. David
David,
Drummond?
can you hold on a minute, please, David? Let's go on, Mr. Powers. I was rude and I interrupted.
Nope, no problem at all. I was just wrapping up. I was saying I'm happy to answer any questions now, but we intend to do a full presentation when we come back in January.
That's it?
That's it.
Rita, do you have anything you want to say?
Not at this time, no. I think it would be wisest to see the entire presentation and have an opportunity for discussion so that you can hear what the signatories' feedback is.
Let me make a request of you and of Mr. Powers. If you can, the two of you can, forward to us your comments and materials at least several days in advance of the meeting, which will not be at the beginning of January. So we'll have to figure out a date. But if you could get to us any comments or the like, I would ask you to talk with Mr. Powers so you can work out an agenda that works for you. But this will move much more efficiently if the committee members know what the separate views are.
Understood.
Okay. Mr. Gelman.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Power, you note that you want to move the mechanical equipment up to the roof, and that's why you need 11 feet more. Where were the mechanics going to be before that in the original plan?
They were on the roof, but both in order to accommodate the rooftop access as proposed for the tenants of the building, and to address some additional code requirements, we're proposing to increase the height of those mechanicals. And we can get into more detail about that when we come back in January.
Anything else, David? Rosemary?
Okay, I don't even, am I being called on? I see David's hand went down. I just want everybody to understand, I hear nothing from the room, nothing. I have no idea what anybody in the room is saying. I hear Mr. Power and Sherida and David clearly. Those who are on the Zoom, I hear clearly. Anybody in the room, I hear nothing. So, I guess because nobody's stopping me, I'm gonna assume it's my turn to speak. The question, Mr. Power, is what is the, I'm ignorant, and what's the application before us? What is the application that you have in front of city
The
planning?
renewal of the permit. It's the renewal of the 5-year permit.
And the second question is, you talk about, I think you mentioned the MOU, that there's changes in the MOU. Those are the two things. What is the nature of the application question before the community board, and what are the changes to the MOU? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Just to clarify, we have two applications, neither of which have been referred out by city planning yet. The first is to renew the term of the special permit, the original and the authorizations. The original term was for 4 years. We applied in late 2022 for an additional 3-year term. That application is still pending while city planning reviews our second application, which is to modify the special permit site plan in various respects. We are hoping that application is currently under review. That draft application is currently under review at city planning. Regarding are those applications have been sent to the community board or about to be sent to the community board, or where do they stand, the actual applications to as public documents? They are still in draft form.
Okay.
With city
Okay,
planning.
thank you. That's helpful. So we don't know. Okay, and I think you mentioned a change to the MOU. Am I wrong? You're the only person I can hear, and Sheridan and David. Did you say there's a change in the MOU? If you did, what are those changes?
Can I respond to that, James?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sharon.
There is a proposed change to the memorandum of understanding, which incorporates many of the restrictions and agreements on the future development on both sites of the Hebrew Home property. And there has been a draft, but it has not been finalized. And we will obviously be looking at that as we proceed.
And the parties that deal with it are Mr. Power and you, Sherida, right? Is that Is that?
The community groups, the signatories to the MOU.
Understood, got it.
Are,
All the
are
same.
the four entities that signed the MOU.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are my two questions. You're the only people I can hear, so I'm glad that I was able to.
I'm very sorry.
Oh, no,
Thank
it's
you.
not your fault. It's technology. Thank you very much.
Now that
Okay.
nobody
Thank
hears
you.
us, we will move forward.
All right. Is there anybody else who has something they wish to add to this subject? Okay. We will get back to you as soon as possible with the next date. We have to figure out how to do that in terms of the beginning of the year. All right?
Okay, thank you very much.
I have it, the next and only other item on the agenda is the DCP report on city or discussion of 18 text changes of City of Yes economic opportunity. Understand we will have a discussion tonight, and the present plan is to vote on it at the January meeting, so that we have all the material, people have had an adequate opportunity to think about it. I will say that I, for one, am troubled by the idea that the members of the committee and of the board being asked by city planning to vote on questions. Please understand the position of the board is whatever resolution it adopts, not whatever questions you ask, because I view that at least as an attempt to circumvent the committee's authority and that of the board. So the position of the board and of the committee under the bylaws of this board govern, not responses to your questions. Having said that, Ms. Thomas, are you going to speak to us?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Hi everyone, good evening. I'm joined today by Benjamin Huff from our central divisions here at DCP. I was under the impression that the discussion was going to be from the board, and Farah reached out to me asking for DCP to be in attendance to answer your questions. Is that still correct?
That's correct.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm very happy to be here again. We're just here to answer any questions that you have, and happy to see everyone engaged with the proposal. And that's pretty much our position. Like I said, that was my understanding from Farah's email, that we're just going to be here to answer questions. And that's what we're here for today.
Just had a quick question before everyone begins. At the last meeting, you mentioned when the clock starts, that the vote we would vote and have an answer by recommendation by January 10th. But when I see it on the site, it says that it was submitted on, that we would have until January 8th. So I want to clarify, because our board meeting that they vote on this would be on January 9th. So we're either a day late or we're right on time.
Yeah, so my understanding from that is that we will allow community boards to submit recommendations up until the date of the vote by the CPC. And I believe that is right up until February, if I'm correct.
That's correct. So you can take additional time to craft your response after the vote. And all the other community boards have been given additional time.
In writing? Is there anything in writing to attest to that?
Yeah, our commissioner put out a letter. We can follow up and share that with you. It should have gone to the community board emails, I believe.
We have it. I will
Okay.
make sure everyone send it to everyone, but I'll resend it.
as a citywide text amendment, this isn't like a traditional ULURP, so that's why there's a bit more flexibility. But yeah, we wanted to clarify and communicate that to the board, so.
What is the date?
You have until February, but
Oh.
officially on it says,
Mhm.
January 8th. They're saying that, we have extra time.
Good.
Every meeting is fine.
January 9th, and then it might take time to get it out there, get it.
I propose that Farah run this portion of the meeting, as long as Chuck's okay. He's not, with it. He's not in the room, so, because I plan on participating, and I'm sure Chuck does as well. So, Farah, if you'll start, I mean, I guess you could start by asking, committee members on both respective economic development and land use committees that have questions or concerns about the proposal in its entirety, and which individual, items that they have questions about, and then we can see if DCP can help us answer those questions.
Okay, well, you have just presented that, so that's great. So, as Nick just said, does anyone have any questions or want to start with any of the text amendments that you want to discuss and ask questions on? Yes.
Yeah, well, I have a general question. I don't know which specific part of the text it relates to, but one of the questions that came up at the last meeting was about codes being updated, particularly DOB and the fire department. And the answer we got was yes, it would be updated. But I think it would be fair to say that DOB has something of a checkered history with this community board, and I would like to know that whatever updating is required, and some of it certainly will be, depending on, for instance, what kind of uses are permitted in residential properties. Will this be done in advance? Will it be done before the regulations take effect, so that we know if somebody decides they want to have a chemistry lab in their apartment building, that DOB is, or whichever is the relevant city agency, is aware and is engaged and has the authority it needs to regulate this sort of behavior. So I'm concerned about the timing.
And the coordination between the agencies.
Yes, and the different agencies that are involved, whether it's DOB or whoever it might be.
I think Ben or Camilla, do you know an answer to that?
I think, so it sounds like your question is about home occupations, or are you more concerned about co-locating commercial and residential sort of on the upper floors?
Well, both of those issues, but my primary question, my primary concern is residential use, is taking residential use for some commercial purpose. Whether it's somebody's apartment in a multifamily structure, or whatever it might be. That's my primary concern. But the other item you raise is also valid.
Okay.
I don't want to find out that this is going into effect and DOB is still figuring out what the proper procedure is for supervising and regulating this sort of behavior in residential property.
Right. DOB's enforcement of home occupations will mostly be the same. We're updating sort of the rules slightly around home occupation to make it a bit easier for folks to do that and clarify it. So that, I don't see that as triggering as much of a change in their procedure. Like the same would be that someone would call 311 about a complaint of a home occupation, if that was the case, and then DOB would go out and do an inspection. For the other things that are saying like upper floor commercial activity, and some of the other rules that we're modifying commercial uses, this is happening after a major alteration or a completely new build. So, you know, DOB will have the information at hand. We're changing the zoning related to that, but DOB would be reviewing the major alteration that's happening and would have all that information present with them. It's not that someone can just, add in commercial space. It would require a C of O and, in many cases, a major alteration. And so DOB will have all the information they need for these, changes to take place.
Well, that works, assuming that whoever's doing this follows the proper procedure and gets the alteration to the C of O or whatever it might be. Otherwise, the alternative is what you said earlier, which is that somebody who becomes aware of this situation has to call 311, and that information gets to DOB. Some concern about the amount of time it takes to do that sort of thing.
Is your concern that the zoning change makes this behavior, that you're saying this happens anyways? I mean, I'm not
No,
sure.
I don't know if it happens anyway. I don't know if it happens. I'm sure there are people improperly using residences all the time. But my concern is that with the rezoning, it's easier for somebody to take liberties and interpret the rezoning to their own benefit. That's the question I raise. I mean, DOB does not, I could tell you stories, and so could everybody else, of buildings that are being improperly used. And if DOB can't get access to the building, if DOB doesn't get access to the building because the person who's engaging in improper behavior in the building won't give DOB access, then DOB can't confirm the allegation that's being made. And I am concerned about something like that taking place in a residential building.
Okay, I agree. And I certainly hope, that's not the intention of the rezoning, and I hope that's not the case. I mean, I'll note we can note the concern. If you have examples of that in your district, it might be helpful for us to sort of look at that more specifically. But I'm not sure, what in the rezoning, I think you're talking about like a general outcome that could happen from the rezoning, that illegal activity will happen, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. That's certainly not the intention of it. Part of this proposal is reacting to, there's a lot of difficulty for businesses to take the proper path. And so that our hope in this proposal is it actually makes it easier for them to, do the legal compliance.
No, I understand that. As I said, my real concern here is that, as we were told, codes and the role of DOB will be updated, and I would certainly appreciate knowing more about that.
In a lot of these, there's 18 proposals, but in a lot of these, most of it is going through either in a new build or in a major alteration with a change of C of O. And so that all that information is getting presented to the Department of Buildings to that. So I think it will be going through the proper channels, but I'm taking your concern and noting that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Marty? I'm just a little concerned numerically that while you think you're looking forward, the city is not looking behind. There's massive stores that are unoccupied at the moment. There are stores that are closing because of crime rates. There are stores that are available for use, no one's taking them. There are commercial space available that's not being taken up. We have a serious problem of getting back to status quo without making things worse.
That's an excellent concern, and that is why we looked at this proposal. And, you know, really, when a business wants to occupy a space, they meet a lot of different barriers. When trying to open a new business in residential districts that had grandfathered in commercial spaces, if it's closed for a certain amount of time, we end up losing that space. It has to revert to residential, and that's not always easy to do. So that is why we had the proposal of you know, removing that timeline for those businesses. Also simplifying C1 and C2 districts. There's a lot of rules on what can be allowed in one or the other, and a lot of businesses, they may see a space and it's only after the fact that they realize the zoning is preventing them from locating in that business. So we really see this as a proposal that will make it a lot easier for these ground floor, especially vacant spaces, to be occupied by businesses again, through the different various proposals. So I think we agree with your concerns, and our hope is that this proposal is going to make it easier for businesses to reoccupy these storefronts.
Ben did a much better job than I was gonna do, but that was one. I guess I could just add that just for our district, we have a very low vacancy rate. DCP has us at 9%. Our data tells us we're closer to like 6 or 7, but that kind of depends on the types of spaces that you're talking about, because certain spaces are not, the larger spaces are not suitable to the vast majority of our businesses. And those are the ones that have a tendency to remain vacant for a long time. The other component of this is that we have, according to the Department of Finance, which is a little bit of an underreporting, we have roughly 650 and 700 storefronts that are suitable for the majority of our businesses. That doesn't count like Target or large community spaces that could be in a commercial corridor. And we have 1,500 businesses. There's 1,200 registered, according to the Department of Consumer Affairs and Worker Protection database. But when we did our research in preparation for the BDD application with Ridgewood Savings Bank, we had roughly 1,500. So if you say, let's just take the high number that we have 800 storefronts, we still have 1,600 businesses. Okay? And of those 800 storefronts, there's even fewer of them within zones that have storefronts that are compatible with the business that we have in terms of our commercial ecosystem. Now, if you add in the price of rent, right, because of the shortage that we have, not just in this district, but citywide, then it becomes even more difficult. This proposal, and I'm not trying to convince people, I'm just letting you know there's a trade-off here, and this is just one of them. There is a trade-off. Okay, make no mistake about it. It's not a binary choice. It's not right or wrong, but there is a trade-off. This proposal will be able to free up some of those spaces and allow more space to become available for our businesses, the vast majority of the businesses that we have, which are with less than 10 employees.
Let me give you a glance to tell you why I share Marty's view that I think we're acting without full knowledge of where we're going. In the course of the coming year, you're going to have congestion pricing, result of which will be to severely injure the business owners in Lower Manhattan and put some more of them out of business. There's no question in my mind, I made that very clear when it first came up to the MTA. No question at all. The first 2 to 3 years, people will stay away from the area. In fact, you have already seen a reduction in garage rentals for next year as a result of the congestion pricing, which they believe will stop cars coming into the area and doing business. That's number one. Number two, in residential areas, in the upper ends of Manhattan and in the outer boroughs, you have a failure to consider a very serious impact on the economy of the areas by reason of the homeless shelters, which have an impact, the migrants in terms of their proper, expanded, hopefully, use. So let me illustrate what I mean by that. I have no objection, none, to putting migrant shelters any damn place. But I do think they ought to be put in, given the mayor's comments about how much they're costing the city of New York, in areas that are affordable. So you go over to 45th Street and Broadway, you see a brand-new luxury hotel. It's now a migrant facility. Not for families, but a transient sort of facility. They're all over the place without thought of planning what they will do, A, for the city, and B, for their neighbors. It's not planned. Same thing with homeless shelters. City planning has no input into the process. If it did, it would take a position that would be rational. Now, it's all done by the entrepreneurs from Brooklyn, generally the members of the law firms, and I'll give you their names, who come in with a proposal to DHS and say, this is what we propose, and here's how much you should pay. They go ahead and do it. Those two planning aspects have to have an effect on the community involved. Put aside that you need more, put aside everything else. I'm talking solely from a planning standpoint. And lastly, you have this issue that Marty has touched on and that Nick has touched on. And my concern is you really haven't looked at that yet to the point where you're prepared to make a recommendation. And I don't know that you factored it in to the recommendations you have made. It's a critical issue. It's going to be with us for several years. And if you don't factor it in, we're all going to be in a position that's no good. We're going to join San Francisco in downtown New York, no question about it. So you have to think about it from planning. Just my view.
Sarah,
Laura?
you wanna?
Rosemary has her hand up, but Laura had her hand up first, yes.
Hi, I have a couple of comments and questions. For one thing, this whole process was a neg deck, so there isn't a real study of impacts on the character of the neighborhoods and environment, et cetera, and that, I think, cheats us of a lot. City planning states that zoning often presents a barrier to opening, operating, and expanding businesses, but there is a very good reason for that. My first comment is not about the one about time running out and the corner store, but about the allowing by CPC authorization, retail and office commercial development up to 2,500 feet within 100 feet of a corner in all residential zones. My concern is that by their very nature, commercial businesses are accompanied by increased garbage, night garbage collection, deliveries, traffic, signage. This is all a neg deck, but this affects the character of a residential neighborhood. It wasn't allowed there before. So I don't know if you've studied what that impact is going to be. Secondly, I have a concern about the proposed changes by the Mayor's Office of Nightlife for live music and entertainment. I happen to sit on the Public Safety Committee, We have our share of issues with bars and whatnot. And I just don't see how, with the currently, how we're living through cuts to the police and all enforcement agencies in the city of New York, there are potential unintended consequences of the law, of this. And this sounds like it's very Manhattan-centric, not for the outer boroughs. So, this is an issue because there's nowhere, anywhere about funding, and funding that will be needed for several agencies to be looking at these new rules and regulations, which gets to what Bob Bender was saying. And so, that is an issue. I think that, expressed concern at the very first meeting about increasing allowable uses and square footage, for employees, for businesses operating out of, one's home, by bringing it up to 49% from 25%. I just can't, see how this would not affect the quality of life of residents in that building or on that block in terms of maybe deliveries, traffic, and the like. So there are a lot of concerns with this, but I can go on and on, but what are the chances when you have these 18 zoning text changes of changes at the end of the day on this? What are the chances of any one of these 18 proposals being excluded? So is this a whole package deal? I know you're asking for input on 18 strands here, but how is this going to work?
So we have that's a good question. There is a checklist where community boards can go through the 18 proposals and give feedback on what they think works and what they think doesn't. And that'll be really informative to us and to the commission and the council as it moves forward. So it's not an all or nothing. You have to vote all yes or all no. We have a checklist that the board can go through for all the various proposals and give feedback on each.
Would you happen to know if, when you were doing the carbon neutrality, which is going through now, whether there are any changes from when that began to what's being voted on in council now? Because I know there are a lot of objections. I'm just wondering if this is a lack of reality, asking about, are there any changes?
A lack, I'm sorry, you said carbon neutrality had a lot of, from who?
No, just boards and people, suggestions for changes. Were any changes made? I'm wondering because that's the precedent, for these text changes. That's the first one. Did that change as it went through the process?
I would say, the feedback was taken in, but the version of carbon neutrality that passed mostly was the same at the commission, and it's at the council right now. And I don't know if we know what changes, if any, the council has made, but we can look a bit more into that. I'm more cued in on this particular text amendment than that one, but we can follow up on that one for you.
Thank you. We've made inquiries to the council too. No one seems to know yet. Just because these 18, there's a lot to be debated on this, and there are a lot of issues. Even it goes along with what's to come. The City of Yes on housing, for example, you want to put the commercial areas in NYCHA, for example. But then when you get to the housing, it's also other buildings, and it just keeps building and building on degrading open space. And, being that this was a neg deck, you never did any studies on impacts on changing the open space. And I think, I'm registering a complaint about that, but thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, just real quickly on the corner store and the commercial in NYCHA, we worked on this proposal with NYCHA, And we don't see this as displacing NYCHA residents at all, though we appreciate your concern on that. We've actually gotten inquiries from NYCHA on how they could potentially reuse underused storage basement space or underused parking garages on their facility. And right now, there's nothing that allows them to bring in commercial space in those spaces. So we just see this as a tool that they could use in the future if they wanted to bring commercial spaces closer to it. In the same way that if you had, you know, entirely residential neighborhoods that would like to bring services closer to them, that's the point of the corner store proposal, is that it would allow a major alteration of a building at a corner that they could put in a very small commercial space that could be a neighborhood serving space. So we see these as sort of, you know, potential tools to make areas a bit more mixed use. I don't think that they're like, it's not like it's going to trigger like a mass adoption of them, that we think a lot of people will do them, but it's a flexibility in the zoning that'll be beneficial to businesses in the future. So I understand what you're saying. It sort of looks different, but, or they're working, you know, against each other, but both of the proposals have been developed at City Planning, Housing, and this in consultation with our partners. And we have gotten positive feedback from them on this.
Mr. Huff.
I am a gubernatorial appointee to the New York City Housing Development Corporation. I am unalterably opposed to infill, which is the thing you just described, at NYCHA projects. I will cast the gubernatorial vote against it. I've done it on every occasion. Why? Because the people who live in housing projects are absolutely entitled, without a single reservation, to have green space, to have trees. They do not live, nor should they live in sardine cans. That green space was designed for them when the projects were developed, to build other properties within them that are neither housing, or if they are housing, are private housing, is an effrontery to the concept. And if you propose that as part of the city planning proposal, I will vigorously oppose it and sue. So be aware of that.
I just want to clarify for the record, we were talking about underutilized, like empty spaces in the basement or in auxiliary buildings, or potentially
Let me tell you what they did with
parking
your
spaces.
proposal.
I did not mention green spaces at all. I just want to clarify that.
Let me tell you what they have done with your proposal. They tried to put in, NYCHA, tried to put into the parking spaces in the only parking lot that existed in a local housing development. They tried to put in a new private development. They tried to take the area where the garbage cans are located, take that and build something on it. Please understand, you need to understand exactly what NYCHA has in mind to do. You may not, and if not, I apologize to you for sounding as aggressive on this issue as I am. I have seen instance after instance, particularly in Brooklyn, where applications by NYCHA have been made to put in the infill areas being benches, green space, trees, garbage facilities, and yes, parking facilities, to put in there some commercial uses. I will oppose every single one of them. And if you propose it, I will sue on that issue. People in housing projects have a right to live in decent shelter, not in sardine cans.
Dick has a follow-up to that?
Rosemary's hand is up.
I've got several.
Hello?
First it's Nick, and then we have David, who's a committee member, and then Rosemary has her hand
We
raised.
jumped around a little bit, but, which is inevitable with this, because there's 18 different proposals here. But on the nightlife issue, that Laura raised, I'm not at all belittling the issue, because I think it's a legitimate concern. All the concerns are legitimate concerns. But just for point of clarification, the proposal is for a 200 limit person, a 200 limit person limit, okay? And then after that, if it's above 200 people, which would be the capacity, then it would be a BSA special permit, okay, over 200 persons. And just in terms of our businesses and the noise, we've had a lot of good luck intervening in talking to businesses to get the technology that they have to create more soundproof, double pane glass. It has cut down on noise and noise complaints tremendously. I haven't gotten one this year from anyone, and any of the ones that we have gotten, we've gone out with the SBS Business Express Service team. They've done noise testing, and the business owners were happy that we brought them this attention, because they're still able to have their business and their patrons to have a good time with music and not alienate their neighbors. So we've had very good success with that. And the technologies have changed. I mean, it's a lot cheaper now than it used to be, and we actually have local contractors that have done this work for our businesses here in this neighborhood. But again, I totally understand the concern, but that's just on that aspect of it. On the, that's on the nightlife component. On the in-home work in residential areas, self-employed individuals up to 3 persons and 49%. The zoning, and DCP, Ben, please correct me if I'm wrong, the zoning does not override the bylaws. We have a majority of co-ops in this neighborhood, of the co-op.
That's
so
correct.
Just because we have a zoning code that says I can have 3 employees and use 49%, I cannot do that lest I lose my proprietary lease, okay? Because that's the rule of the co-op board, and that's the rule of most co-op boards. If a private landlord who's renting space, it's going to depend on the individual leases. If I'm a landlord and I have an individual, a residential lease that predates this zoning code, chances are it's going to be prohibited anyways. Moving forward, as these new leases are negotiated residentially, individually for rental spaces, it will depend on that negotiation. I doubt that landlords will be jumping at the opportunity to allow tenants to be able to have 3 and 4 or 3 people and over 49% of their space. However, the zoning code, the change in the code does give some people the opportunity, at least in a temporary basis, to be able to expand if the co-op board's okay with it and if their landlord's okay with it. And those are 2 big ifs. But I can just say, anecdotally, we have had businesses come to our meetings. If anyone's been to our meetings, I'm sure you've met them because it's been more than one, who said, I'm operating out of my home, I'm worried I'm gonna get in trouble, and I really can't expand. I wanna hire people, I have more business than I can handle, but I'm operating this out of my apartment. So this is an attempt, it might not be a perfect one, but it is an attempt to address that issue. On the, well, I'll stop before we get into the NYCHA. I will just say that, you know, as I read the proposal, again, this is allowing opportunities for NYCHA to monetize space that's not currently being monetized. And the budgets of NYCHA, if you haven't been paying attention, are really bad. Right? We get roughly 40% of the $4 billion annually that they take in from rents. 30% direct subsidy from the government, and the other 30% through the voucher program. And they're still running at deficits of $120, $140, $150 million years annually. And that's after an influx of ARPA funds. It dropped the deficit down from $300 million. So it's just a numbers game. I mean, they have to find ways to raise revenue. It might not be the perfect solution, but if I would love to hear others.
They can raise revenue without injuring the tenants.
Well, opening a store is not injuring a tenant. That's giving a tenant an opportunity to have a store. There's a lot of NYCHA residents, the ones down in over by the High Line now, and people are complaining that they don't have the amenities, the stores, the places that they're used to frequenting, and they have to walk 4 or 5 blocks. It's not accessible. What about somebody who's disabled? What about somebody who's elderly? Wouldn't it be nice for them to go downstairs to be able to get the goods and services that they need, as opposed to trying to go through several blocks in a neighborhood in the situation of the Sherman Creek projects down on
And the answer
down on
to
10th
that
Avenue.
is a very simple one. A special permit for a facility like a local grocery or like store is totally different from the plans that NYCHA has said it would do, which is to have it for all sorts of stores and commercial facilities. NYCHA said it wants to do. And NYCHA can do a much better job from the economics if it is prepared to confront a very difficult issue and do it sensibly, and that is personnel. I formerly represented that union. They ought to do something to confront that issue, because it's a serious, difficult issue that's draining a huge percentage of money.
David, are you done next? And we have our next speaker is David Gelman, and then we're gonna call on the committee members first. We
I
have
think
Joy next.
Rosemary's hand has been up.
Yeah,
Well,
but
Rosemary's
David-
hand was up before mine.
Okay, Rosemary, then David, then Joy.
Well, thank you very much, Farah, thank you. Let me try and be quick. This is not my committee and not my issue, but what I've heard, so far, I really need to comment on a couple of things. One, Bob Bender's, issue that he raised with you, Mr. Huff, is a serious issue. It's not, it should not be, pushed off by, and I'm not accusing you by pushing it off, but the statement that, oh, this will only happen in new buildings or rehabs. Here's the thing that people need to understand with the zoning change. It changes the zoning for all purposes. So when somebody raises an issue and says, oh, it'll only happen here, it'll only happen there, it's not true. When you change the zoning resolution, you change it for all purposes. So Mr. Bender's comment and his concern should be seriously taken. I completely agree with Bob on that with the building department, without going into detail. I think it also goes to, let's see. I do not even consider, why do we consider commercial in residential? It doesn't, it's not going to happen, commercial and residential. One of the speakers said, it's just not going to happen. How many tenants, landlords won't want it, co-ops won't want it. Here's the thing, you're changing the zoning resolution. You've changed it for all purposes. You can't pick and choose those things that people say, I think there'll be a problem with this. Oh, there won't be, because that won't happen. That's the problem with every answer I'm hearing on this City of Yes. Okay, whatever issue you raise, well, it won't happen. This won't happen here. It will happen because you're changing the zoning resolution. Okay, now, next, I have to say, Laura Spolter's comments were spot on. I could never, thank you, Laura. I don't have to repeat everything you said. It was perfect, okay? And actually, to sum up everything that she said, I want to say, but what's the benefit of all of this? I don't understand the benefit. I really don't. And don't tell me, but I really don't understand the benefit. Last, I will say, I am the chair of the Housing Committee, and our chair, off the back of the last joint meeting that you guys had, said, Rosemary, there's a section on the Housing Authority. The Housing Committee should take it up and take a look at it. We did. Of course, we had a very short period of time to do it. I have spoken with people in Fort Independence project and development and Marble Hill. And we had our meeting, and we had a number of people on Zoom, and the committee discussed these issues. It is unanimous that we are not in favor. The sentiment is not in favor of this. And how do I say, it's not, Mr. Huff, you say, oh, there are empty spaces. They can find a use for the empty spaces. You do not understand these developments and the people who live in them. They love their projects. They love where they live. And every housing authority project is built in residential zones. Take a look across the city. They're residential zones. They were done that way for a reason. When you look at these, we have the best housing authority developments in the United States of America. Look at them, the parks around them, the open space, the park. They are magnificent. And the people that we talk to in our community, do not want commercial developments in their development. They don't want it. Why? Put a deli in. You have deliveries. Trucks are pulling up with Coca-Cola and paper products, and you got truck traffic coming in to deliver. And then, of course, when you unwrap everything, you have garbage coming out. And in addition, you have signage, because the zoning resolution allows you to have signage. You want neon signs? They want their residential communities. They have uses. You don't have to tell them what they're going to do with empty spaces. They've taken up the spaces with community centers, with spaces to do gardens. They are not interested in commercial development on the ground floor of those projects. And I do want you to know we have over 2,000 units of housing authority units in our community district, and they're not interested in this proposal. Thank you.
David, you're next.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Huff, a simple question. Who owns NYCHA? That is to say, any revenue gained from leasing out properties, does it go to NYCHA? Does it go to the city? For example, revenues that are gotten by the Parks Department do not go to the individual park or the Parks Department. They go into the general fund of the city. So that question would need to be answered.
NYCHA would be handling the leasing of that.
Yes, and would they be getting the revenue from the leasing, or would it go to would the site get it, the revenue? Would NYCHA in the main offices get it, or would it go into the general fund?
That's a good question, and I'm gonna have to follow up what NYCHA, we're just creating a tool in the zoning that would allow them to do it. How they choose to lease it and where those funds would go, I'd have to have NYCHA answer that question, but I will follow up on that.
Very good, thank you.
How do we know what the NYCHA residents want? Anyone ask them whether they would prioritize green spaces over commercials?
You heard Rosemary's report on the Housing Committee and their view that they don't want it. The only place I have seen any indication that NYCHA residents want to have the commercial spaces within the building. And by the way, it's not limited to grocery stores. It can be bicycles too.
Or doctor's offices.
Exactly. Well, doctor's offices, I believe they do have in some of them. That's not counted as commercial space.
Community facilities.
Daycare centers, is that?
Community
No,
facilities.
they have those. They have those.
They have those.
It's a sale of product, basically. The only place I have heard anybody come forward to HDC and say, we want it, was a couple of places in Brooklyn. And they were primarily in places like Coney Island and Brighton Beach. It's not a minority neighborhood.
So why is it mutually exclusive that they have some limited use to develop spaces that aren't already being used? So not necessarily green space, because as he said, he did not mention green space. He said areas that were not being used or underutilized.
They use the garbage facilities. Claim that and parking spaces are underutilized. That's the areas that have been approached so far. Don't know. I will tell you this. I have heard not a single housing authority tenant association come out and say, we want to have this on a broad scale. I have heard individuals say, I'd like to have a grocery store here. And that's why I said, do it by special permit where you have a real need. Okay? But the issue here is, with respect, and I don't blame city planning for this, not at all. With respect, there are some people who have a real problem with housing authority projects. They tried to federalize them, which means sell them privately. They are now putting them up for management by the private sector and ultimately will sell it to them. They forget one thing. They're right. It is a drain on the taxpayers' money, and it should be. The people who are eligible to live there can't afford the full rent. The government has a responsibility to.
Gabe Klein, hi Gabe, who's in charge of building these EV chargers, says, don't worry, quote, you have to go slow.
But the tower in the park, Le Corbusier, however you pronounce his name, and as many studies have shown that unfortunately the design is not optimal, and that having foot traffic, line of sight, different periods of time when people are moving in and out of green spaces, where they're sometimes not line of sight, that create sometimes security risks in those areas. And I'm just talking about the design in general. That this proposal would attempt to address that in some circumstances. It wouldn't solve it by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that the whole tower in the park design is not something that you see very much anymore in terms of new development, and there's a reason for that. And that doesn't mean you're putting people in sardine cans, but it means that there is a downside to that particular design, and I'm sure there's a downside to the newer designs as well.
Anyone have any more questions or comments?
Now, I think other than new business, we are done. Anybody have any new business?
So I have another question for DCT if they're still on.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So I looked very carefully at your manufacturing zoning changes. And And I think it's actually very creative, very innovative, but I think it might be a little difficult for people to understand exactly what you're attempting to do and why. So if you could express that to us in layman's terms, I could attempt to do it, but I think you'd probably do a much better job.
Well, I could start just for, the proposal that's in front of you. We've written new districts, we haven't mapped them. So we are creating these sort of in the zoning resolution to allow for potential future rezonings that would go through community boards, would require votes from the CPC to actually map these districts. But we wanted to create districts that would allow businesses to sort of build up and scale up. So, we're looking particularly at like M11 zones that are sort of becoming obsolete in the future. And so, really the goal is that we're able to create taller forms of manufacturing, which actually takes inspiration from, buildings that were built back in the day, like when Soho was a real manufacturing district, and allow for that. And that is feedback we've gotten from developers and manufacturing businesses in the area. But we're essentially creating these districts, but again, we're not mapping them. And therefore, we're not putting these districts anywhere yet. This would be allowing them for the future. And then any, to map them would require rezoning in the future that would go through community boards and CPC vote and the city council and all that.
Okay, and then another follow-up question. Give me 1 second because I have one here. And could you discuss sort of the number 8, the ability of life sciences to expand?
Yeah, in this sort of simplest way to say is that there are a lot of hospitals in the city that are looking to expand sort of clean research lab spaces, and we have in the zoning that they're able to do that. And so this is sort of an industry we're losing to the region a lot, and we've seen a demand from, hospitals to have, located next to their campus, sort of clean research spaces. And so that's the hope of that proposal, is that we're going to allow for that. But there's a very high bar for these research labs to sort of meet those requirements to locate them. So we don't see them as sort of incompatible where they would be. Think a lot of like the Upper East Side of Manhattan down to the, east, all along the east side, all the hospitals. So that's sort of the hope of that proposal. And it has a lot to do with like the floor plates that they need, and the size of the building. So it allows us to sort of zone for those envelopes that they'd like.
I just want to, just for the sake of my committee members and the residents, just to try to give them a little context that, New York City, the Economic Development Corporation essentially cultivated a life sciences sector in New York City out of nothing. And we didn't know anything about this until the Economic Development Corporation came to our meeting and presented it to us. And this is really a textbook scenario of export promotion, because we had the talent and we had the facilities. With the public money, we were able to essentially create a private money-generating business. And we have, I think, over 500 different life science businesses in the New York City area at this point. And the second phase to that is what they call import substitution. Okay, so you have export promotion. We start to, doing R&D and testing these products, and then, selling them out to, the larger companies, Bristol Myers and things like that do things in pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. And the import substitution is that in these industries, the overhead is extremely high. And what that means is all of the products that they need to be able to do what they do are extremely expensive and difficult to come by. So they have to import them. And a lot of times they have to go through customs, they have to have shipping and handling costs and all these other things. So what the idea is that if we can get local companies to locate here or start up here that can provide all of those overhead, those intermediate inputs in economic development jargon that they need, that could create a tremendous ripple effect. And we call this cluster spillovers in economic development. It has a biofeedback to it, so that it creates a system of reciprocity where we have all these other ancillary businesses supporting this sector so that all their inputs are sourced locally. And then the imports that are sourced locally, those businesses ideally will get all of their imports locally. So, and this has an environmental impact as well. Because imagine and think about just if you have as simple as terms, you have a pizzeria, you don't have to go to Italy to get the cheese. What if you could go across the street? Or you could go across the street to get the sauce, and you had the dough right there, and then something's wrong with it. So now you just go across the street and say, hey, you didn't do this right. So this is the advantage of proximity that has been, proven to work time and time again. But right now, the life science industry is essentially stuck. It's still doing well, but it's stuck in terms of that second import substitution effect of economic development. That if they had the spaces to be able to do it, then it could make a tremendous difference in New York. So I'm sorry for the long-winded,
that's all correct. I kind of actually
but it's
wish you had
important
led.
for people to understand what's at stake here.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And I kind of wish you had led, because that's a good example of like sort of the industry at large. But, our hope with the text amendment is to basically make it easier both to allow to like create the envelopes of these buildings and have the use group that they need to support sort of these clean research labs. So that's great. Thank you.
And
Also a
just one
good
more
point for
thing on-
proposal 3 there, of like the clean production facilities for local makers as well, which is also tackled in this text amendment.
Correct. Which is another thing, and there's a reason why, it's vertical, because the vertical spaces, it's very difficult to get affordable space if you're doing small batch manufacturing, because the cost per foot of the market is not conducive to the profit margin. So if you have vertical, the price per foot is presumably going to be less because you're not ground floor retail, which you're going to pay a premium. So that's why DCP put in sort of the vertical where you can go up with the idea that it will be less expensive. So it was a very clever way to kind of use the market in order to provide these businesses with affordable, usable spaces in proximity to larger anchor sectors. And they did a very similar thing in Proposal 18 with the manufacturing, because with the loft-style construction, again, in real estate and in economic development, we call these flex spaces. Because the idea is, like, now we have the nanotech sector. Well, nanotech is not going to relocate to New York City because it's just not conducive to that, right? Square footage, ceiling heights, loading, all these different things that they have in upstate New York. But the idea of the flex spaces is, well, now we have nanotech. Well, what's next? We don't know. So if you have a flex space in a manufacturing zone, you can at least have an opportunity to pivot to what the next CHIPS and Jobs Act is, which is $1 trillion, which we're not going to see anything of, right? But what's the next industry? What's the next innovation? What's the next technology? And this is the first time that I've seen the city, actually to play the what-if game, right, as opposed to being reactionary. To say, well, we don't know what that innovation and technology is going to be, but let's not miss out. Let's create these mixed-use zones, these manufacturing zones that have the ability to be flexible and to change configurations, to change, different uses based on the technology of the time, so that we might be able to get that industry that I don't even know what it is yet.
We have 3 others have raised their hands.
Marty.
Do you want Rosemary or Marty? Okay.
Just,
We'll let Marty speak.
just want to point out that you and I start from different perspectives. My perspective is 2-3 months ago, or maybe more than that, when I attended a session via Zoom on this project. We were told that there were 9 or 19 districts in the city which they want to get rid of R1, R2 completely. And this is the method, all of you said, I don't deny or argue against, but my perspective is, I'm not ready to give up private homes. I'm not ready to give up the concept that when I look in North Riverdale and see all those private homes I can't own, but they will turn into storefronts and they will turn into high-rise or whatever. I don't know if that's the future of the city I want. When I talked earlier about the problems of Manhattan, they're gonna solve the problems of Manhattan by making us into a Manhattan without solving the problems of Manhattan. My original comment. So I am leery about this whole prospect, whole program, because I'm not ready to give up R1s and R2s, even though I live in a high-rise.
I think it's a jump to suggest that this proposal is gonna, get rid of R1 and R2. I mean, and by the way, we've got R6s that are all single-family homes. Just go up on Claflin Avenue and Webb Avenue.
I'm just telling you, that's the objective I was told by the very people who are talking to us now.
Understand, those homes were built.
With this proposal, they told you that was their objective?
When I first
With
learned
this
about,
economic opportunity?
when I first learned about, City of Yes, that was the presentation. R1s and R2s were in the way. The governor has tried to get rid of it. She's been blocked a number of times. So this is not new. This is a carryover of that philosophy, and that's what's in the back of my mind as I read all of this.
When I read the text, I read all 600 pages, 650 pages. I don't get that out of this, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I just want to interject real quick. Totally agree with Nick. This proposal is not speaking about removing any kind of residential district. This is purely making changes to economic or to commercial districts. I'm not sure where the notion that we're gonna erase or remove R1 or R2 districts is coming from. That is not part of this proposal or any proposal actually. So just want to make that clear. We're not getting rid of R1 or R2.
Find the slide. Sure.
And if you find the clause in the text amendment, let me know what it is, because I'm curious to read it myself. Obviously, I missed it.
Okay, Rosemary is next.
No, oh, okay, somehow I feel I have to respond to Nick. It's, I don't know where you've been. That is exactly what this proposal is about. Not this proposal, but City of Yes housing. That's exactly what it's about, to eliminate R1 and R2. We have already been, I'm sorry, here's my problem. If somebody is speaking from the room, I can't hear. So if somebody is speaking, can somebody on Zoom say, Rosemary, shut up, somebody's speaking, let them talk? Because I can't hear you from the room, okay? I'm sorry, somebody, again, I don't know, do I hear something? Can I speak now?
Nobody
Yes?
is speaking.
Okay,
other
thank
than
you. Oh, good. When Nick talks about businesses and the running of businesses and what they need and everything, very, very smart. He understands businesses. I get it. Very smart. Pay attention to him. That is not what zoning should be. His ideas should be addressed in public policy. This administration should address in a public policy way what the issues he's raising about businesses. Zoning is easy and cheap. And that's what bothers me about this whole proposal. Throw a zoning thing up. It's easy and it's cheap. And we can say we did something. This is not doing something at all. Public policy is tough. You want to deal with small businesses or big businesses? Public policy is tough. This administration should not stand back and throw a cheap zoning a solution at what they perceive the problems to be. Very, very, very troublesome to me. Very troublesome. And I think that really is what I had to say, except the tower in the park, Nick. I hope everybody is able to get the international section of the New York Times for October 23rd, an entire division on blueprint for cities to cool large cities. It's called green. You have to have green between all the tower in the park. That's exactly what they're calling for. Climate control people are calling for. Okay, so thank you again. Please don't anybody say anything else so I don't have to respond. Thank you again.
Ms. Leffler.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. I'm a guest tonight at this meeting as someone who works in life sciences. I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what sorts of life sciences facilities would be possible under this plan. They vary a lot, from chemical synthesis to the development of transgenic mice to oligonucleotide synthesis. So there's a real variety there. And I'm just curious if the plan gives any guidance as to what would and would not be possible. As you said, a lot of this work is done in China and India right now, where it's significantly less expensive. So it would be great to onshore it. But some of it, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution necessarily, because there's so many different techniques inside of this industry. So which ones specifically would be encouraged?
This isn't a proposal necessarily to like encourage or discourage any particular, like, I don't know if I could speak to those technicalities. What I would say is like the zoning resolution is pretty outdated in how it deals with the term sort of research science labs. So we are updating and clarifying those rules to give the industry more certainty of where and where they cannot locate. And we're broadening the existing scientific research and development facility special permit so commercial labs can set up near hospitals and universities. And they'd still have to go through a process, but we're really focused on sort of like modernizing the zoning rules that define what a laboratory is, just so that they're more certain. I'd have to go back and look at like what exactly we think would be included or not included under that. But this is really just to give more certainty for folks like you who say if they wanted to locate in New York City, what's the process by which they would open up a research or development facility.
Thank you.
Last one is Mrs. Brown.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me? Yeah, my question is similar to Mr. Leffler's, I believe. This new designation, I guess, would allow for labs. And I know there was a huge fight and a push down in CB9 regarding Columbia's satellite campus extension. That was a huge fight because there was the concern about a biosafety level 3 laboratory coming into a metropolitan area. Albeit a commercial stretch in a district there, the proximity to residential dwellings is very close. So we need more understanding as to, I guess, the breadth and the depth of this new designation for zoning, because it's a little loose, I think, and just a bit concerning. So I don't know, if the labs are acceptable of any type and there's no sort of cap or no consideration on the, the types of labs, the level of those labs, I think we need to hold off on rezoning.
Ben, can if I remember the text correctly, if it's an actual laboratory, then it has to be permitted, is that correct?
That's correct. And there's like
Regardless
a lot
of
of
whether
health
with
and
the
safety
zoning change, it would be permitted.
There's
Okay.
a lot of health and safety guidelines, from FDNY, city, state health agencies of how those labs get approved, of what would be allowed in it. So this is not like a blanket slate. We're going to allow anyone to do anything in these spaces. There's a strict process to it, but we're updating sort of the zoning text that's a bit more clear on like if they even wanted to propose one, where and how they can do it. But there's still like a whole process that they'd have to go through, both with FDNY, the city and state health agencies, to get like an operating permit.
And just to clarify the previous I'm sorry, I think it was Abba. I'm not in life sciences. I knew nothing about life sciences until EDC came to our committee meeting and told us about all this. I guess it was a year and a half or 2 years ago. But in doing my research, it's not so much of the laboratories that at this point we're trying to support, that the city is trying to, the economic developers are trying to cultivate, but it's the input into those laboratories. So like handheld pipettes, desktop centrifuges, all these things that I didn't even know existed. Apparently for some of the things that they use, they need these particular containers, these like micro containers that can't be just plastic. They have to be some kind of material that it's not conducive to mass production, that it's more like small batch, so they have to go and there might be one supplier, and the supplier of course gouges them, and then if the specs aren't right, they have to ship it back, and then it has to be shipped back again. So these are the types of sort of spillovers and backward linkages that they're trying to create within that sector, not necessarily laboratories that are doing the experiments.
Thank you.
Okay, we will set up the next date for January. We'll talk about it pretty promptly and see what we can do. But I guess what we'll have to do is do it prior to the next board meeting, so that the board can think about where it wants to go. I have one item of new business. Dr. Leffler, you wanted to add an item to the agenda concerning a development at 69 Stevenson Place, 71 Stevenson Place, and 3862 and 3874 Sedgwick Avenue. What is that all about?
Yes, that is correct. I wanted to make the committee aware of this. I am a resident of Van Cortlandt Village on Sedgwick Avenue, and the residents in the area have heard through the grapevine, so to speak, that a developer is in contract for all of those properties. It is primarily one developer called Innovative Development, and they are planning to essentially purchase these properties along with the Van Cortlandt Jewish Center and likely combine them into one very, very large unit. It's unclear exactly what their aim in acquiring such a large amount of contiguous space would be. We've heard potentially a school. We've also heard potentially a very, very large residential development. But I'm bringing this to the committee's attention because I want to make the point that this area of Van Cortlandt Village comprises a significant fraction of the green space in the area, including many, many mature trees, some of which are over 80 years old. The area also already suffers from a parking problem. And-
Let me interrupt you if I may.
Yes, yes.
Could you get to us the name of, and if possible, the address of the entity, and we will bring them in at the next board land use meeting,
Yes, I can do that.
all right? Farah?
Mm-hmm. I've got it, and thank you.
Thank you.
What are those
File.
addresses again?
It's on the extra sheet.
Yeah, 69 Stevenson Place, 71 Stevenson Place, 3862 Sedgwick Avenue, and 3874 Sedgwick Avenue.
One of those addresses is
Thank you.
Van Cortlandt Jewelry Center.
Yeah.
May I make one
We will
last,
bring them in.
may I make one final point quickly?
Sure.
So this area, some of the houses in this area are of significant historical value. And also this abuts the Jerome Park Reservoir. And we have heard that this developer might want to blast or pile drive in very, very close proximity to the Jerome Park Reservoir is a retaining wall. So naturally, we're very concerned about this, and I appreciate your being willing to hear this out.
I want to hear about it. If you have any further information concerning this, please get it to the board office as soon as possible. We will send out the request within a matter of days, as soon as we have the date of it, so that they know that we are on it.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other new business?
One announcement for economic development, the nominating period for the Betty Campbell Adams Most Valuable Merchant Award will be coming up in January, so we're going to update the nomination form. We don't require a nomination form, but we prefer that people at least use it as a guide, or actually if they use it, but it's fine if they don't. And the one stipulation is that it must be a for-profit business that not only has demonstrated outstanding entrepreneurial skills, but also contributed to the community in various ways. Okay, so we look forward to those nominations. We already have some that are floating around there. I'm looking forward to reading them, and we'll open that up in January, and we'll send the announcement release before our next meeting.
Any further business? Hearing none, I have a motion for adjournment, pardon me?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all those in favor, contrary-minded, abstention. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for the presentation.
And thank you, DCP, yes.
Thank you, Farah. Let us know if you have any follow-ups, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thanks for your time on this proposal. We appreciate your feedback.
Thank you. Have a good night.